Welcome back. We ended off with Patanjali's statement in 34 about the exhalation and pausing of the breath. Again, this pause is gently done. You're not holding locks tightly. It's a complete relaxation. And then you can pause for a long time. If you're holding the locks, you're using muscles, you're contracting, you're using energy, and then you won't be able to stay for a long time with no breath because you're producing too much carbon dioxide. So practice that as you wish. As I said, if you're not practicing the other aspects of yoga, you're not healthy enough, don't do these things. Just try meditating, stopping your mind in some other way. So the next, Sutra 35, he mentions the concentration on subtle sense perceptions can create a steadiness of mind also. Now these subtle sense perceptions can be going into a deep relaxation and feeling your heartbeat, feeling the pulse, feeling internal aspects of your being that are normally subconscious. That's why they're called subtle. We don't generally notice these things, but we can, and in yoga we are focusing our attention on internal process, from the physiological internal workings of glands and organs and cells and breathing, heartbeat. All of these things can take us to the inside, and just focusing, let's say, on the heartbeat, connection of the breath to the heartbeat, you're sensing this nice wave-like rhythm of slower rhythm of the breath, a faster rhythm of the heartbeat, 1 per second more or less. And this, because you're focused on a sensation, a feeling that is internal, brings the mind to a calm place. You're just listening. My attention is focused here. So the modifications of the mind, all the activities, can stop temporarily. And if you do these practices, it becomes temporarily longer. And then what Osho called a gap between the thoughts becomes a reality in which you can dwell and just be in that state of non-mental activity. So the steadiness of mind can be created by practicing this. Then he says also in Sutra 36, by concentration on the Supreme, the ever blissful light within. So you have to have a certain amount of experience discovering these things before you can do this, obviously. But this is another aspect of the reality. There's a lot of things happening within, and the inner feelings can take you to the inner light, seeing the energy moving through your nervous system into your brain as an energy of light. It's all essentially electromagnetic energy, which has a light manifestation. When you go into inner vision and you start seeing this inner light, that can take your attention. It keeps your attention because it can be quite beautiful and flowing. A very nice experience which does not require analysis. And when you go deep enough and you're seeing flowing mandalas unfolding, being created in every second, it's kind of hypnotic and your mind just shuts up for a while. So this light within is a reality, but you have to go deep enough to tap into that. Otherwise, it's not necessarily available. The next one, he's talking Sutra 37, by concentrating on the mind of a great teacher. I mean, this is the concept of Buddhism, Christianity. You're looking at someone who has connected with the divine, and you are focusing on them as a, let's say, a role model, and looking at their peaceful state, at their existence, at their teachings, and just kind of partaking, or through osmosis you're feeding into their psychological mentality of peaceful existence in a knowledgeable place about the universe. And this can override your little ego's turmoils about what's going on in your personal little world. It's bridging into the higher state. So these people didn't have attachments, they were not busy in the world, they were simply spiritual teachers. You can choose a spiritual teacher of your liking and focus on their reality, their mentality, their state of being until you can feel, almost as if you can feel their presence. You're feeling the presence of the mind, state of mind they were in, and that will calm your mind and bring it to this peaceful state. So we also have to bear in mind that these teachers of ancient times, Christ, Buddha, Muhammad, the prophets of the Old Testament, they were in touch with something beyond, and they became the leaders of the culture they were living in. People looked up to them as having that divine connection and followed their teachings so that they could also find this divine connection or go up into the divine planes of consciousness, which everyone is always thinking or had been thinking. It's a place we go to when we die, the kingdom of heaven, etc. In yoga, that place is here and now. When you take the veils off your eyes, when you take the mortifications of the mind out of the way, you realize, whoa, this is really a trippy place to be. It's absolutely beautiful. Now, especially if you're in a natural environment like this, if you're stuck in the city, in an office, doing your daily grind, doesn't look the same, okay? Now, today we have the influx of the guru generation, people traveling around the world and realizing gurus are also enlightened people and people follow gurus. Ask them for advice and what should I do and how should I live, and all of this is part of the game of following. So this is where the can make the distinction between the people who are following their own path and finding their own way to heavenly consciousness, or those who are following someone else hoping that they'll get there. A certain amount of trust is involved and needed to understand the faith that needs to be developed in order to get to these states. So the next sutra that Patanjali is talking about, Sutra 38, he says, by concentrating an experience that you have in the dream state, in sleep. So he's referring to this place out of the control of our, the controlling consciousness of our conscious mind, where we regulate everything to be logical, rational, etc. The dream state throws all that aside and you end up in this place where you can enter the realm of possibilities. I've talked about this a few times. In these dreams, you're not limited by what has to be rational, totally logical. So your mind is more open to other possibilities. Also in these dreams, you can then be going into past and future. Maybe you can go and visit the Buddha in the past and see what the teachings were all about and feel. In the realm of the Akashic field, all the dreams, all the possibilities, the past and future are all there. And it's in our dream state that we have the ability to go to these places without limitations of it has to be rational, logical. You have to accept the society's normal way of thinking and go along with that. So the dream state is mentioned as one of the areas, one of the ways in which we can access the more divine levels of consciousness. Also, in your dreams, you might encounter angels and other things. So be aware of going into a state of deep relaxation, bridging into the sleep world, going into the meditational state from there. These states of consciousness beyond the rational are all kind of connected. And what's in the way is, of course, the rational mind with all of its modifications, comparisons, and all the stuff. The memories, the future imagination based on the past memories, not based on out of this world possibilities. Now in the next sutra, Patanjali says, by meditating on anything that one chooses that is elevating. So then you can go from being in a church and looking at the saints to looking at the church with its steeples that are pointing up to heaven, to a statue of Buddha, to a mosque, or whatever it is. All of these things can elevate you and help bring your consciousness above the realm of simple material existence where you're struggling to survive, to pay your bills, to do all this. So anything. You can use mandalas, you can use art forms. Let's say the statues of the Buddha and Jesus or Mother Mary are all art forms that have a significance behind them that is transcending this world. So you can choose anything. You can use all of the mandalas that we use in Chakra Yoga, in Raja Yoga. It's the symbolism of sacred geometry that brings the mind to a different state. Looking at sacred geometry has a different impact on your mind than looking at a square building that is a well-designed bank or something of that nature. So what you're looking at, you can focus on it. If it has an uplifting effect, you can use that to help elevate your consciousness. In Sutra 40, it goes beyond to say that gradually one's mastery in concentration extends from the primal atom to the greatest magnitude. Now, mastery in concentration is going beyond the contemplation, which is where we deal with the mind. And when we can concentrate and focus on something, we can go into our cellular biology, we can reconfigure our molecular structures of our own chemistry, we can influence that and change it. We have mastery over that when we have taken this yogic path and we understand what we're doing and how things work, how the electromagnetic waves come in at certain frequencies and format into the molecules of our being. And then from there, mastery of the greatest magnitude, from the zillions of atoms and molecules in us to our manifestation in the world, how we can influence and direct what is going on. This is one of the realities. And in later sutras we go into the siddhis, again, the magical powers of concentration applied to doing things in the world from a supernatural level of consciousness. The level of the magician, the level of the yogi, the level of the shaman. The walking on water of Jesus. These things are all realities that we don't think are logical and rational and possible. But the reality is, everything is possible. So stay with your concentration, keep the contemplation active so that you're observing the mind and keeping it in its place, not leading your consciousness everywhere into whatever nightmares it can come up with. Sutra number 41. Patanjali says, translated in this way, just as a naturally clear crystal assumes shapes and colors of objects placed near it, so the mind of a yogi, with its subdued modifications or activities, becomes clear and balanced, and attains a state devoid of differentiation between the knower and knowable and knowledge. And this clarity of consciousness is the meditational state of samadhi. So you're no longer seeing, I am here looking at that over there, but it is one experience of perception of what is here and there, all being in the same field. So these states of meditation are a little bit difficult for people who are still living in a subjective place of, I am me and I am having this experience. The experience and the experiencer become one in a grander experience that seems more totally absorbing of your own consciousness. Your consciousness is part of the scene. In order to have this experience, you have to have a certain number of experiences, and if you don't understand any of this, then it's a good idea to go and have an experience in an ayahuasca ceremony where everything can melt down. Your perception can begin to see that everything is one. You and the ground you're standing on and the trees in the distance are all vibrational energies that are part of one big ocean in which we are all separate waves, but we're all in the ocean. This experience can't be described to the mind, because the mind is logical, rational, analyzing all of this and saying, well, that's a leaf on a tree over there, and I am here, sitting in a chair. You can have an experience in consciousness that goes beyond the separation, and you see it's all an experience. And having the experience and what we are experiencing is all part of one thing. Again, you will not really understand this until you have these higher experiences. Patanjali is trying to describe it, and I've seen many strange intellectual interpretations of this from people who haven't had the experience. And it doesn't quite make sense. Even his analogy of a crystal or a jewel. The crystal assumes, when you look through the crystal, you can see a reflection of this, a reflection of me, a reflection of the video camera taking this scene, a reflection of the garden around. It's all in the crystal. But if the crystal doesn't have any color, the light and the pictures are coming through clearly. And the mind of the yogi is like this crystal where the images, the experiences are coming through without being tainted, analyzed, looked at from different angles. It's one experience. The experiencer and the experience are completely entangled. And you don't really see this without a higher consciousness perception. The mind cannot grasp it. In Sutra 42, Patanjali describes this state as Savitarka Samadhi. That's the Sanskrit name for the state of consciousness in which the distinction between you and me and the camera and the chair and everything dissolves, and we're all part of one electromagnetic ocean, condensing into the molecular structures that make up the scene that apparently is reality. But again, the Hindu perspective, the India perspective is, this is a dream world called Maya. Reality is the electromagnetic ocean and the consciousness observing what's happening in this ocean. In the next Sutra 43, Patanjali is again speaking about levels of consciousness, levels of samadhi, which are consciousness beyond the mind, once the mind game has been modified, suppressed to a point where it's not interfering with your actual perception of life. When the memory has been cleared of the knowledge of the object of concentration, then the object is a new experience. Like a child who doesn't have the memory of having seen this thing before. It's a new experience, and it's glowing, it's shining, it's exciting, it's joyful. It's a different level of consciousness. So this is another Nivitarka Samadhi, is this place where you're not distinguishing anything at all. It's an experience in the oneness of life. So Nirvitarka means there's no object of concentration. So it's not that you're having an experience of something and you're becoming one with the experience. There isn't really an experience happening. There is your consciousness being in its own nature, devoid of the distractions of objects of which to be conscious. So this is another level and layer of samadhi, another meditational state of your consciousness. Understand the difficulties of Patanjali trying to express these things to those who have no experience in these higher meditational states, because you're using the mind to try and explain something that is beyond the mind. The mind cannot experience consciousness in its unified field. So how do you describe something? Normally we describe things, well, it's kind of like this and it's kind of like that. But these states of consciousness are not like anything we know in this world.